So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am so excited to share the content of this webinar. Um, Obviously, something about the title of this, The Virtues of the Doldrums, appeals to a lot of people. And so let me introduce myself and then we'll get right into the content. I'm Karen Warner. As I said, I'm a graduate of the Master of Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. I graduated in 2013, very innocent time, seems like a long, long time ago. I have run my own coaching and consulting company, The Tangible Group, for almost 20 years, almost ever since I became a coach. And recently, I also have written a book about caregiving. It's called The Sudden Caregiver. It's waiting in production until we get through some of the difficult times that we're in so that I can be able to share that. If anybody on this call has caregiving issues, because I've used my caregiving circumstance as an example as we go through the cycle of renewal, and you want a copy of the manuscript, I would really be happy to share that. So one thing that we're going to talk about today a lot is the doldrums. And doldrums, if you're sailors, is a term that in sailing that means there's no wind. So picture a nice, beautiful day, you're out on a sailboat and you're sitting in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the water, waiting for something that you don't control to come along and make sure that you make it home. We're also going to be talking about the doldrums as a phase of disenchantment. It's part of what's called the cycle of renewal, and this is that I'm going to be showing you today. Let me say a word about my internet connection. I'm broadcasting this from Beaufort, South Carolina, and you may see me freeze up and then I'll catch up again, but we're going to make the best of this that we can. So doldrums for the cycle of renewal is one of 4 phases. And what I find very powerful about this cycle is it applies in so many situations when we are in a state of flux or change. I want to honor the wonderful person that you see on this slide, Pamela McLean. She has been my guide and my light for ever since I got my coaching certification in her Institute of Coaching in Santa Barbara. And I will tell you 100% of the time, people who hear about the cycle of renewal, I only have 30 minutes to get you through it, want to know more. And so this is Pam's book, Life Forward, totally recommended. It's in its 6th edition, so she constantly keeps it fresh and new. And I just want to offer my gratitude to the Hudson Institute. They're very much credited with most of what we're going to talk about today. But if you want to learn more, highly recommend this book. By the end of this session, you should have a proven MAPP, the cycle of renewal, and you should understand how that works, for handling life's changes. And then some new ideas that I'll share and that others have shared with me for navigating during this time of uncertainty. Before I begin talking about change as a cycle, I want to talk about the way that we actually have a mental model of change. And what Frederick Hudson, Pamela McLean, who have founded the Hudson Institute, the late Frederick Hudson believes that change is cyclical. And so, but we actually experience change as linear. So think about, I'm a little kid, my parents put me in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, go all the way up, 1 grade at a time, get into high school, get into college, and we're progressing as if we're climbing a ladder. I get my first job, I become a supervisor, I become a manager. Again, we're climbing a ladder. That's our mental model. It's no wonder we think of ourselves as climbing that ladder. But in fact, and this is the really good news, change is cyclical. Renewal follows a cycle. And that's what Pam and Frederick Hudson believed when they've done years and years of adult development, and this emerged out of it. So here's the cycle of renewal. And this is what I'm going to do is take you through each one of these 4 phases. But the most important point of this is that it's this quote from Pam from her book, Life Forward. There are no arrival points. If I gave you this map and you said, oh, I'm in Go For It or I'm in cocooning, that might be true for that moment. But as we have found out, just as we've gone through the first 3 months of this year, no sooner do you get somewhere, don't unpack and get comfy, because you're going to probably have to move on. Some of that, and this model is very useful, change is self-determined. You want to figure out if you want to change jobs or move to a new city. We're in a period of time where our changes come from outside, and there have been some significant times in recent history where that's true. We'll talk about that a little bit. The other really good news about the cycle of renewal is it's renewal. So if you're in Doldrums, and I would suspect many of us at least spend a little part of our days there, you're going to move forward because you can see the little black arrows around the edges. We're constantly moving in, as what Pam says, a long continuous journey, and as we navigate unending change. I thought I would borrow a question from Hope Theory, and this is Charles Snyder, and he asks a question that I think brings out the agency in us, our ability to take responsibility and self-determination for wherever we find ourselves in this cycle of change. And this question is this: is there an earlier time when you felt this way, this doldrum way, and you got through it successfully? Because if you can think of that time, you can give yourself hope and give yourself an example of, what did I do then? What strengths did I use? So I asked a few of my clients what they would say, and this is how they weighed in. First thing on top of mind, because what we're in is such a global period of distress, the first thing people say is September 11th. And I myself literally changed my careers. I was a VP of marketing in a really great venture capital firm in Boston. And I was outside the country, and I literally decided on September 11th, this is not how I don't want to do this anymore. I'd been in the cycle of renewal. I had changed so many of my transitions, jobs, and I didn't have one more mini transition in me. And I'll tell you what that means. I have a client who grew up in New Orleans and was really impacted by Hurricane Katrina. And so this is her way of looking back, looking at what's going on now and what she's been through before. The Great Recession of 2008, need I say more? It seems like it was just yesterday. And I was speaking yesterday, some of you may know from Penn, Rosie Hancock. I was speaking yesterday with her about the Christchurch earthquake. She was living in New Zealand, and she woke up in the middle of the night. It was pitch black, and literally her world was being upturned because she was as part of an earthquake. So those are global events, and we live to tell the tale. There are also personal things as I talk to people. So I'm dealing a lot with people who are losing their jobs, or their jobs are being put on hold, they're being furloughed. Before this coronavirus even took place, we were working with a team of people that had been told that they were being restructured because of a business restructuring. And so people have lost their jobs, they're in the process of losing jobs, and they can't just go out and interview. Again, stuck, doldrums, waiting for that wind to pick up. But we know people who have lost jobs and they find new jobs, and maybe it's not easy, but we know that we have that ability. I have a client / friend who, he and his wife woke up one day and his son was deathly ill of an unknown, undiagnosable illness, and spent a good week to 10 days in pediatric intensive care before they could figure out what it was. And then because of my own experience in a classically doldrum place that I lived through and got through the other side of, I will use the story of my own story. My husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer quite unexpectedly. And literally I was in go for it. Sky was the limit. I had the best job on the planet. I loved everything that was going on in my company. And I took a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. He had taken himself to the ER, and gave me this news that he had stage 4 cancer, and it literally came out of nowhere. We had no inkling. Because it is a serious issue, but it is also my story. I will use it to explain to you how the cycle of renewal works. So let's think of the best part of the cycle of renewal, which is this phase called go for it. And that is our heroic self. We're expansive, harmonious, energized. Like, think of the best day, the first day of like the best job, and you've just been waiting for this thing to happen, or you're going on a great vacation and that you've waited for so long. You're happy, you're moving forward, you're just bring it. And the way that you know this is you're not hesitant, you're just moving forward, and everything feels like you could conquer the world. And no matter how great that is, even the best jobs gradually move over into a feeling of being out of sync. Even the best situations eventually flatten. And you end up in this place we're calling the doldrums. And that's a feeling of feeling disenchanted. So out of sync, trapped, helpless, sad, resistant. We have all, if we are not these people, we've all spent time in the doldrums, but we have certainly all worked with people who are in the doldrums. And these are the people that you cannot get away from them without them co-opting your, they want to complain to you. It's always them out there that aren't being fair to them. When I coach people who are in this phase, I very gently try to edge them into another phase, because really in the doldrums, if you can't take agency and responsibility, you can't be coached. It really comes from the inside. And that's what we're going to be talking about. But here we are stuck in the doldrums. And I know for myself, when I chart my doldrums, they usually happen at 4 o'clock in the morning, when I wake up thinking about my mother who's in assisted living and no one can visit her. And I'm not quite sure, because of her age, that she really understands why that is. And then it goes from there. But we have an opportunity to not stay in the doldrums. So there are 2 really great things about the doldrums, one of which I'll share, which is of all the 4 phases on this model, the doldrums is the place where you get to leave it. You get to pick up and say, I'm not doing this anymore. So if you have the agency, if you can be aware that you're in the doldrums, you have an opportunity. And I'm going to be talking about that in a bit. Now, when you leave, you have a choice. You can do a mini transition and go back to that happy place, that heroic self of go for it. I'm thinking right now it's an unlikely option for us. And so what I want to introduce and sort of propose as we go through the cycle of renewal is that we actually move to the position of cocooning. And I think a lot of people make this effort, at least on Facebook and some of the social media sites I see. People are really trying to take advantage of being a little more withdrawn, quiet. It's a liberated feeling. When you're really in cocooning, you're bringing all the questions. These are big questions. They're life questions. And you're bringing them to a very quiet place. You don't know what you're going to be in go for it, because you've got to go around. But you're at least in a place where you're accepting the quietness. Now, I will say, because I do this in corporations, I talk about this a lot, invariably, people in Western culture, corporations, usually in the United States, will raise their hand and say, this is not what my boss wants me. My boss doesn't want me to be cocooning. Don't you think my boss wants me to go for it? And I would say that's true in Western cultures. What you can do if you are secretly cocooning, you can do all the work. You can make it look to the outside world. You can give the external effort, but keep that part of yourself to yourself, that stay a little withdrawn. Put a little curtain up between you and the rest of the world so that you can take care of yourself. Because this is, again, another metaphor, cocooning, meaning you're a larva. You're not quite the butterfly yet, but you're going to become one. That's the hope of being in phase 3 in cocooning. And gradually, over time, you don't choose to leave cocooning, but over time, you get enough of your questions answered. So what I will tell you is, when my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, I was smack in the doldrums. It was a stunning time in my life. And I knew that I could no longer be in go for it. That was not going to happen. And I had to call my clients and tell them I got to take some time out to figure this out. And I tried really hard knowing this model. I knew the place I needed to get to was that place of cocooning. And again, it is a place where I had no answers. I did not know what was going to happen. We were fighting for life, but we just didn't know what would take place. I will tell you, my husband passed away 4 years ago this week. And going through the cycle, knowing what I know about the cycle of renewal was very helpful for both of us to go through that caregiving phase. And eventually, so he did pass away. And as I was cocooning, I picked up, I moved to South Carolina near where my sister lives. I didn't know anyone. I was me and my dog, and I sat at my kitchen counter with a cup of coffee and started writing my book on caregiving. And over time, my energy began to return, and gradually I left my inner self and I moved to this new place. And this is the fourth phase of the cycle of renewal, getting ready. So this is a creative, refreshed, prepared, you've rested, you're ready to take something on. I knew that I did not want to take my coaching business back up to full strength again. I just didn't have it in me at that time. And I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. So I started looking for a job in my new little town, thinking, well, the only way you meet people is to go to work. At least that's been my experience. So I took a job in economic development in my town. I got to meet the city council. I got to understand how the city operated, how the county operates. It was a good way to meet people pretty quickly and very comfortably. Eventually, I realized that wasn't for me. There were many aspects of that job I loved, but what I really loved was my coaching business. And I'd done it for 15 years before I had to put it on hiatus. So I decided to take that back. And where you end up when you go all the way through the cycle of renewal is you end up back and go for it. And I love this T.S. Eliot quote, because the idea that when I was in go for it, the day before I heard about my husband's diagnosis, everything, the world looked a certain way. Having gone through the complete cycle of renewal, just with that one example, there are many others in my life, I can tell you that I'm returning to go for it. And I've taken up my business again, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. But like T.S. Eliot here says, we shall not cease from exploration, which is what Pam is saying. We are continually changing. The end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So when I come back to go for it, having gone through the entire cycle of renewal, I am not the same person. I might look the same person, my house might look like it's the same place, but I have changed, and you will have changed also. I want to wrap up our talk by talking about the doldrums and cocooning. So you're sitting here in this disenchanted place, and you love the idea of this inner self, and you've got kids climbing all over the house, and you're trying to get your job done, and you're working late at night when they go to bed. And what I would like to encourage you to do is gentle yourself into cocooning. And I want to talk about some ways to do that, and really two ways. The first is let the doldrums work for you. So I promised you that the doldrums, there were two really good things about the doldrums. One is you get to decide I'm leaving and then mini transition or go to cocooning. But the other one is that we need them. And so when I am with a corporate audience and I ask people to stand around a floor mat and say whether they're in doldrum, where they stand, which phase, which of the four phases, no one really wants to stand in doldrums. And either everyone stands in doldrums because something terrible is going on in the company, or maybe one lone person. No one wants to be in 100%, but they're key to change. You need to go through them to understand what you notice about your circumstance, what you want to change. Because once you notice your doldrums, it's like a wall that you push off of, get swimming underwater, and you keep the end of the pole, flip around, and use the pole to push yourself in a different direction. That's what we need the doldrums for. I'm just going to check messages now because this is I'm not seeing them. Hold on, let's see. I'll finish the slide. So focus on what you can control is another strategy for letting the doldrums work for you. While your strategy is on hold, your big career strategy, your what you want to do with your life, we were thinking of moving, we were thinking of starting new little companies. We can't do that right now. Everything is a little bit on hold. My book is sitting waiting for a better time to be able to be published. Another really good thing about the doldrums is it's good every once in a while to sit with your fear, sit without answers. We have this idea that we have to run for the exits. We always have to run back up and go for it. But cocooning and doldrums and then cocooning are a really nice time to contemplate your endings. What's going away here? What do I need to let go of because I'm not happy? And then when you're ready, choose to move on. You can mini transition if you know what that is right now. You can do a mini transition, or you can cocoon. Now, the other strategy is to choose cocooning. And these are 6 things that are taken right from positive psychology. And they're things I really believe in and I've practiced myself. One is hunt for the good. So when my husband really was in very bad shape and he lay dying, I would wake up every day going, this is still going on. And I had this Paul Simon lyric running through my head, which is, I think the song is American Tune, and it goes, but I'm all right, I'm just weary to the bone. And I used to wake up focused on I'm weary to the bone, but over the course of the morning, as I got myself going, I would go, I'm all right. So hunt for the good. This is a count your blessings time. There's so much good in what is going on, and we can't see it because this big coronavirus, COVID-19 situation is looming. Create something new. You can't control the world, but if you have a hobby, if you have something that you love doing or don't necessarily get to do because you're working so hard, try to carve out a little bit of time. If you knit, if you paint or draw, take an idea that doesn't exist in the world and make it happen. Manifest it somehow, garden, create something out of nothing. And that gives you power over something in which you might feel powerless, and also give you a little spark of purpose. This is one of the most important things. Like if you do nothing else, help someone else. Other people are far worse off than you always. That's the beauty of support groups and things like that. There's always people who are better than you, better off, and there are always people that are worse off. So reach out and help someone. And a lot of people are trying to figure out how to do that while we're all physically distanced and social distanced. Create routines and rituals. When I was coming up through my cocooning and coming back into getting ready, I decided that I could not spend all day, every day in my house by myself. And so I decided every Sunday I would go to church, because people go there, especially in the South. I would go to church and I would sit among people that were at least thinking good thoughts for that 1 hour. And I would pick up a newspaper, New York Times, on my way back home, and a chicken. And I would get home and I'd make my coffee and I'd read the Times. I'd put the chicken in the oven and the whole house would just smell so incredible. My little dog has no idea what a home cooked meal smelled like until I started doing that. It was a routine and a ritual for me. It's a simple thing. Find something. Go outside and play. Exercise is critically important. So find a way to do your exercise. I know all our gyms are closed. A lot of gyms are offering free apps because they can't allow people in, and they want to make sure that you come back to them after this is all over. Again, when I was in my absolute worst doldrumy cocooning state, I would get up and walk. I lived in Boston, outside Boston, and I would walk in any weather just for an hour with my dog in snow, ice, rain. It didn't matter. There was something really generative about being in nature. Allow yourself to do that. Keep safe. And start a gratitude journal. In positive psychology, this is something it doesn't have to be a journal like you go to Barnes and Noble and buy it. It's write down at the end of every day, what happened today that I'm particularly grateful for? What was something good that was unearned? I didn't do anything and it came my way. And also write down who in my life am I grateful for today? So this is a little exercise, and this is kind of it. The Hudson Institute, Pam, and the Life Forward book talks about this thing as a magic formula. What are you going to hold on to? What are you going to let go of, take on, and move on? So just take a minute for yourself, and as I walk through this, and write down for yourself, what are you, what is working on to? So question number one, if something could be good about the current situation, what would that be? What could you go for? And that's what you want to hold on to. So my example, I always travel for work, but right now I can't. So it's kind of cool to be able to have that dinner that, like a regular family time. What isn't working and hasn't worked for a while? That's your doldrum question. Be honest with yourself and let go of what's not working. It can be something small. It could be something big. It could be something big. So when I'm full out working and traveling all over the place, I frequently miss my workouts because I don't have my gym. I do a Peloton bike at my home, but I'm not carrying that with me. So being so focused on work that I didn't take time to exercise is something I want to let go of, because now I realize there really isn't any excuse. What's inspiring you as you picture yourself moving forward? I'm taking on what? What do you want to take on? This is your cocooning. It's a question to sit with, to meditate on. I've been talking about creating an online class forever. It's something that doesn't exist now that I can create at some point. I have no idea how, but I'm thinking I'm going to create an online class, and I have the time and I have the effort now to do it. And finally, your getting ready question, where do your thoughts produce good energy? When you fantasize about the future, when things are open, what changes do you want to make? What do you want to move toward? So I like digital. As you can tell, I'm an online learner. Like, I really want to take a class in digital marketing so that I can make sure my book gets out to as many people as possible. And I have a marketing background, but it's very classic marketing. And I have a healthy respect for people who understand marketing and social media. These are some of the things I asked my friends what they're doing to cocoon, to gentle themselves into cocooning. And this is what they're doing: purging stuff that should have been thrown away a long time ago, setting up a home gym, taking a Coursera course. One of my clients is holed up in her condo with her 23-year-old son, and they're sharing phone time and giving each other conference call space. And she said she ordered a sewing machine online, and she found a pattern online to make surgical masks. And she and her son are making hundreds of masks so she can distribute to her neighbors, her friends, and take to church. One of my friends / colleagues, we work together a lot, she teaches Pilates in her spare time, and so she's entering the world of online fitness teaching live from her guest bedroom. So now I will stop sharing, and I will see what questions you have. And bear with me as I understand what's going on here. So in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, you can go ahead and type questions. And if I can, I might be able to unmute people so you can speak. I don't know what that's going to be like, so let's see. That didn't get me anywhere. Okay. So does anyone have any questions? I'll just wait a few minutes. Okay, here's a question. What suggestions do you have for someone living with a chronic illness, i.e., it can feel like being in the doldrums all the time? It's an excellent question. It can be. It can feel like it. And as much as possible, I would say find small ways to move yourself out of the doldrums. So maybe you don't do big mini transitions, but you say, I'm going to work a month, or set yourself some goals that you think you could manage that would make you feel more at cause. The whole thing about being in the doldrums is that feeling of being mired and stuck. And if you don't move yourself out of the doldrums, it's likely you're going to stay there. And so that's why I say pick a mini transition or just journal, keep track, like write things out. There's some research that says when you write things out, you actually understand better what you're thinking, and you come to different conclusions for yourself. I don't know if that is something you could see yourself doing or you might find helpful. I have another question here. Is there a recommended time period for every stage? That's a good question. And how do you know that it is ready to move? So Anjali, there is no recommended time period for every stage. It really is the pace at which you renew, and it depends on what the circumstance is. And the only thing so go for it, you try to hold on to as much as you can. You move into doldrums. So say it's a life chapter thing, an everyday thing, like I have a great team, I'm in go for it, I love my job. And then my boss comes to me and says, well, I'm retiring and we're going to move your whole team over under Larry. And Larry and I have never gotten along. So now I'm in that circumstance. So there's a mini transition there where I can just go, you know what, I don't want to do Larry. So I'm going to go mini transition and take another job inside the company, move my team, do something. But I swap one thing in doldrums out for another. That you can, to some degree, you control the time of that, of moving out of doldrums. The other ones in cocooning, it just depends. It depends on what you're working on. I have another question, Beverly. Let's see. I am finding that going through and organizing old pictures brings back happy memories of wonderful times. That's a really great suggestion. It can get overwhelming because depending on how many pictures you have, and if you'd like, I can send you all of mine. And somebody, let's see, these are great tips, Karen. What books or resources would you recommend to help work through the cocooning phase? What color is your parachute used to be a popular reference. I do have a good answer to that, and then I'm going to come back to JC. There's a really great book, it's been around for a while, called The Artist's Way. And it's a good cocooning book because what she says is, first of all, appeals to everyone, and if you're an artist, cocooning is a good place to get in that spot. And then to really look at what's going on with you. So connect with your inner child. It's a lot of softer stuff, but it's so appropriate for cocooning. And so it's called The Artist's Way. The author is Julia Cameron, and by now there's even a workbook that you can get to go with it. The thing I love about that book, if you don't get the book and you don't want to know, read the whole thing, is have a look at, well, there, I'll just tell you what the exercise is. She has something called morning pages, where you take 3 8.5 by 11 pages and you just write them, you know, stream of consciousness first thing in the morning. And that goes back to what I was saying to JC earlier, that sometimes just the act of writing ignites your brain and gets your brain to be focused on it. And gets your answers to come. We all have the answers inside ourselves, but thankfully you don't always know that, so you need coaches to come along and do that, but to help you do that. But the morning pages, even if all you write is, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, eventually your brain kicks in, your heart and your brain connect, and you can begin to write things that you're maybe not even sure you were aware you were concerned about. So that's the artist pages, that's Julia Cameron. And the other thing she has you do, which I think is a good thing, is pick 1 hour a week. It's gonna be hard right now, but you could do it with a little creativity, to take yourself on what she calls an artist date. Like, what's something you love doing that you put off? For me, I used to like to walk and look at yarn in yarn shops, and I love going to Home Depot. Not doing any of those things now, but what could an artist date look like for you? So that's a book that I can recommend. I'll give it some thought as I'm answering the next question. Any suggestions on how to approach this model with someone who is homeless? I've been helping people at my church, and we often deal with the homeless. Their situations are often complex with things that are interrelated. That is, they can't work without a car, they can't afford not working or need medical care before they can work, and haven't got the money to get the medical needs, etc. It's hard to know where to begin with them and help them move forward from being stuck. Wow. I'm not sure I can give you a fast answer for that, but I would say, and you're raising the question of, in my mind, is the cycle of renewal only for people who are aware that they need the renewal, that they're aware of the changes that they go through? And I'm not sure I can answer this in one thing, you know, one sentence or, you know, in the time we have. But I will give your email address. So let me think of this and get answers. I would say Pam's book, Life Forward, is really a great, it's a great and more detailed synopsis of this with exercises that you might be able to find something to adapt. But happy to talk about that offline. And Anjali, the name of the book that I just mentioned is called The Artist's Way, and the author is Julia Cameron, C-A-M-E-R-O-N. And have you studied the hero's journey? Yes. Oh, Kristen, this is, yes. For my thesis to graduate from coaching school, I superimposed the hero's journey and the cycle of renewal, and nobody had done that. So I was very proud of myself, but good for you, high fives. It does remind me of the hero's journey, and that adds a whole, if you know the hero's journey, adds a whole, you know, great layer to what we just talked about and what we just threw. So, okay, I think we're running out of time, and we might be out of questions. One more question from anyone before we wrap up? It's awkward, like it. I want to see all your faces on Zoom so I can see you nod and smile and things like that. Okay, well, listen, I am so grateful that, thanks so much. I'm smiling. Okay, good. So thank you all for showing up and giving up your evenings, your beginning of evenings if you're on the West Coast, or certainly it's getting toward nighttime here. Thank you for giving up your CNN watch of the day so that you could have something uplifting instead of something that just makes you like wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And happy cocooning. Thank you so much.